Leibniz. I wanted to give a kind of lecture-ish type thing because while I thought that what was going on was extremely interesting in the class, I was concerned that people were not quite getting the reasons why, for example, the monad has become so central to contemporary theory and philosophy and so on. Now, basically, what you need to think about when you see the word monad is the word difference. Not the word God, not the word soul, although those words are non-secular versions of difference. Or anyway, that's what Leibniz is claiming. So to be as clear as possible, what I was worried about before is that it seemed like there was this division that was going on, when in fact this monad situation is naming in an earlier couple centuries before, the Heideggerian move, a form of difference that actually has contours, that has ways of talking about different sizes, different dimensions. So this was the absolute key aspect that people seem to be missing. Or anyway, I heard people to be missing it, so maybe I heard you wrong, but that's why I was very concerned. If you look at what made me think the better way of explaining it than I had done before was when I was with my master's students, we were going over identity and difference. We were going over Steinbock's introduction. And in it, I will just turn to it, on a page where she's explaining how Heidegger is setting up this question of difference. Basically, she explains that he draws it from the monad. It's just like one or two sentences in there. But it was very interesting to me that that's in there. And I just want to read it out to you. I thought I had it here. Heidegger. So it's an identity and difference. Where is it? Or not. How my life is going today.
The bottom of page 8.
Thank you. Can you read it out loud?
In the history of Western philosophy, identity was at first thought as unity, as the unity of a thing with itself. The two thinkers who were most explicitly concerned with unity or identity as a central problem were perhaps Plotinus and Leibniz. Plotinus begins his sixth Ennead, 9, with the statement, "It is in virtue of unity that beings are beings." Plotinus' ultimate reality, the one, capital O, is beyond even being, capital B.
Wait, I'm going to stop you right there. Now, say it again this time. What page are you on?
Bottom of page 8.
Oh, right, okay. Just, if you can read the bit above it, the paragraph before it, because what she's doing is she's laying down the groundwork of what it is why Heidegger was trying to get out of metaphysics. And he was trying to get out of metaphysics. In the end, we know he doesn't get out of metaphysics. And he was trying to get out of metaphysics because he equated metaphysics with theology. And with the problem, metaphysics that was basically based on a dialectical totality. Or some form of universal holism or universal totality. Sorry, repeat it. She's saying that what Heidegger is trying to suggest is that philosophy, and therefore metaphysics, is not best understood by dealing with this question of totality. And therefore Heidegger moves to the question of how do you come up with a unity of something? How do you come up with a way of talking about a simple structure without invoking the principle of totality or totalization, the specific kind of unity. And that's why he goes to Leibniz. So if you can just read the very beginning top, the identity and difference bit.
Identity and difference shares with being and time the fundamental problem of the relation of man and being. But whereas in Being and Time, Heidegger began with an analysis of the meaning of man, Dasein, proceeding from there towards an understanding of being, Identity and Difference asks about that very relation itself, as
Okay.
the relation.
So repeat that again. Identity and difference is what?
Identity and Difference asks about that very relation itself.
And which
as
relation is that? I know you're gonna kill me. Which relation?
the relation between man and being.
Man and being. And why is that even on the table? Why is that on the table? Who cares about this relation between man and being? Why is that the thing that Heidegger or anybody is giving any care about?
That's the beginning of a relation.
Close. I mean, read the sentence again, please.
Identity and Difference asks about the very relation itself as the relation of man and being.
And does anybody have a sense of why that comes into question?
I'm probably
No,
wrong.
no,
But
take a flying
it's,
leap.
oh god, I forgot what I wanted to say.
See, I've been wrong
You're just thinking about the dirty comments.
That the relation between everything can be read in the relation between man and being.
Yes.
Yes. So that relationship portrays every relationship.
And so what becomes the ground? What become, not to completely recite the last semester, but why is a ground important in the understanding of meaning? Or why was it thought to be important? What did ground do to a meaning?
Give it a goal.
Gave it
A reason.
Movement around.
Yeah.
so my meaning and your meaning would be the same meaning if we had it sort of sutured to the same point. That suturing to the same point is the ground, is the ontic. Now, the relationship, and so the way that meaning was being put forward was that it had to somehow be linked to be, do you have your feet on the ground? If you have your feet on the ground, it sort of means, or that implies that you're not floating off somewhere or coming up with like crazy ideas. That there's some gravitas. Again, being grounded. All these things, mean that you are linked to an ontic point that allows you to proceed with a specific kind of logic. And the specific kind of logic that Heidegger is attacking is the logic that puts being at the center of the universe. Or in fact, that puts the universe at the center of the universe. So this is really important here. Being as the ground is being challenged.
So does it open to the situation, like
Yes,
situationism? I don't know how to say that.
it will, but not quite as quick a leap as that. The context will be important. But you see, Adorno also talks about situationism and context. So there's still something more going on that is being suggested, because Adorno, as you know, is dealing with dialectics. Heidegger is challenging this. He's getting beyond this. Okay, so now next sentence. So we know that the primary relationship that's being put on the table is relationship of man and being, which is going to show up. He's going to do something with this.
It does not inquire into the components of the relation, but into the relation as a relation.
So identity and difference does not look at what makes up identity on the one hand and difference on the other, that is, say, its components. It looks at the relation itself. Key number one. So these lectures, Identity and Difference, are basically suggesting, don't think in terms of elements as in like the elements that we were doing the other day. Think in terms of a relation. Now this is going to get very weird, because these elements are going to have, let's say, definitive lines in them, except they're not lines. They're going to have some marking to them, except they're not marked. And this is what is the complicated thing. They're going to have some way of being divided, except there's no divisive scenario. Sorry about this. Okay, continue.
This manner of thinking about the problem of identity sets Heidegger apart from the traditional metaphysical consideration of that problem. It brings him closer to the pre-metaphysical thinker Parmenides' dimension of identity. As Heidegger points out, Parmenides thinks being from the point of view of identity as a characteristic of this identity. But later, metaphysics comes to represent identity as a characteristic of being.
And what's the difference between what he just said? Sorry to keep interrupting you, poor Dean. What's the difference between thinking of identity as a characteristic of being or thinking of being as a characteristic of identity? What's the difference? What's this, like, you know, eureka moment for?
Yeah, I understand, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Parmenides thinks being from the point of view of identity as a characteristic of this identity.
So being is a characteristic of identity, right?
So it belongs to identity in a way.
So it belongs to identity. It's not identity.
But later, metaphysics comes to represent identity as a characteristic of being.
Okay. Can you take a stab at it?
I thought it was, yes, it's those two verses. So it's like the, so for Parmenides, it's the, it's being with thinking involves a belonging together of like, so this, which, so being and thinking belong to identity versus the, instead of the metaphysical sort of identity belongs to being and thinking.
Okay. Start again. You're close, but you're not articulating it yet. You will be. If you think of last night when we were doing it with the MA, when we were having a discussion with the MA class, what is Parmenides? What's he kind of known for in terms of this whole argument? What,
It's this notion of the sameness, where it's like an active thing.
right, okay, he does know about sameness, but in terms of, let's say, here are your choices. A, speaking. B, writing. C, idea. D, all of the above.
He
What-
says that thinking and being are the same thing.
He does, but does he use A to set his argument? Speaking. B, thinking. C, language. D, all of the above.
It's being with thinking.
Do it again. Just 1 second. Okay. Hang down. Try it again. Okay. Is Parmenides thinking about, is his argument that he's putting forward based on A, speaking, B, thinking, C, playing with toys, D, all the above?
Speaking.
It's all the above.
Speaking, very good. Speaking. Speaking. Okay. Now, the notion of speaking versus the notion of writing, or the notion of something else, is linked in Kierkegaard, for example, with what? What's Kierkegaard's big thing? It starts with an A. Ends with a T.
Angst.
No, that doesn't end with a T.
Attunement.
Yes, attunement. Now, attunement means what?
To be in tune with something.
Yes, being, you know,
Listening, to be in the
Listening.
moment. Yeah.
to be in the moment. So Heidegger is going to develop an argument in in identity and difference about the relationship between speaking and listening. But what is being said here is that the speaking moment goes, let's say, out, and the attunement, I'm using my ear just so you get the picture here. You're creating from the speaking and the attunement some kind of relation. Now that's a very different relation, for example, than me, hitting Mattia, sorry. Which, that moment there is not speaking and hearing, right? It's something else. So there can be different kinds of relations, but more importantly, the relation between speaking, which is so there's not like a solid, and hearing, which is also waves, let's say, or being on the same wavelength. It's, you know, it's not the same, there's nothing solid about it. Those non-solid things create a relation. So he goes to Parmenides because it's a very peculiar multiplicity of these endpoints, as it were. So the elements that he's talking about are elements that are already always heterogeneic. They're always already multiple. So speaking or hearing, these are multiplicities. They're not one flat line or one dot. There's like cloud or something. One is the cloud of speaking and one is the cloud of hearing. And they create a bond. They belong together. They create this relationship. So he goes to Parmenides to talk about how that thing, attunement, listening, and speaking, create a base or ground around which meaning gets established. That's a very different relationship than saying this, not this, X, anti-X. These are very, you know, that's also a relationship, but that's not the kind of relationship he's talking about here. He's talking about something that is very, let's say, ephemeral. We're just going to use that word for the time being. Even though speaking is and hearing is something. So now continue. So when you hear Parmenides, think that what he's doing with the Parmenides move is he's coming up with this kind of fuzzy sort of relationship. He's trying to get you to think about how a relation which sets up boundaries are not solid boundaries. They're cloudy boundaries. They're like a cloud, no, not cloudy, they're cloud-like boundaries. There we go.
Could we say like teaching is something that we all know, but it's not a thing?
Yes, you could say, in fact, any gerund. You know, teaching, gerund, G-E-R-R. If you don't learn one, if there's only one piece of grammar that you learn in this class, it's going to be a gerund. G-E-R-R-A-N-D, gerund. Swimming, walking, talking. It's the ing thing, which is almost as important as the ish, which is Wittgenstein's ish. Wittgenstein has this whole thing about adding an ish to everything, reddish, bluish, greenish. And it's very, it again does that kind of messy thing. It smudges. And the smudge is the form of logic here, not the endpoints per se. To think in that way, you do that as artists. I don't want to say naturally, because there is no natural, but to the degree to which there could be, you're doing that. You're led, your thinking is led by this ability to take the smudge seriously. So you get this kind of thing that's going on. The smudge, I'm just going to stay with this for a second, is a type of surface that can exist without a structure. That's where we're going with this. So can you go back? Oh yeah, sorry. Kirsten.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just thinking. So is it that this relation can never be fixed because the dimension of attunement is always going to make it.
Okay, here's the
sort of
kicker.
smudge. So it's
Not only
going-
can it be fixed, it is always fixed.
right. So,
Yeah. He's not talking about relativity.
no, okay.
But even if you were talking about relativity, relativity is fixed. E equals mc squared doesn't mean anything's possible all the time. E equals mc squared means in this situation, this is what's going to happen. So already we go back to Alberto's, in this situation, this is what happens. It's not in any situation you can possibly think of, anything could happen. It's this particular one where belonging happens. Next phrase of the sentence.
Thus the originality, native to identity, as thought by Parmenides, became subservient to the metaphysical understanding of being.
Okay, anybody want to translate that?
Could you say it again?
Thus the originality, native to identity, as thought by Parmenides, became subservient to the metaphysical understanding of being.
Originality, subservient to identity. the support of a human being.
Okay,
Oh,
now,
God.
It's what you've just said, isn't it? It's like each situation has a different set of considerations.
okay, and that can make it original,
Yeah,
but under metaphysics,
it's flipped round.
it flips it around. And how does that, yes?
Sorry, no.
How does that do that?
The ground.
Yes, and how does metaphysics do that with the ground? So if Parmenides is saying the
55.
ground, yeah, if Parmenides is saying that the ground, well, sticking with the smudge, is established through the hearing, attunement moment with speaking, that creates an originary ground. And the originary ground for Parmenides is what kicks off identity, except this kicking off is done from the point of view of a smudge, not from the point of view of a not smudge, or a no thing, or a non-thing, or anti-thing. If it's done with something that has a positivity to it, smudge, but in fact it has no weight, it has no space, it has no, so it's there but not there. But to say it's there but not there is misleading, because that invokes metaphysics.
But he doesn't call it ground, I think he calls it field.
Yes, he calls it field, yes, that's right. And
So
that's,
it's a big
he's very
difference.
clear about, yes, that's right, and dwelling gets later into dwellings and so on. But just for the time being, what he's weeping over is that Parmenides' clever move about making that a ground, making this kind of ephemeral, whatever you want to call it, non-sticky thing, that somehow makes meaning stick, gets subsumed into a dialectical process of let's say, thesis, antithesis, and you know what happens with the whole thing. The thesis gets sublated into the antithesis, or the other way around. That comes back around, it gives meaning to the whole thing, and through the synthesis. You probably don't know what I'm saying yet, but don't worry. It'll come to you.
Yeah, I'll get that.
It's just we did this last semester, like every 5 minutes, so people have heard it. But what a thesis, antithesis, so you have the deep cut. You have thesis, antithesis. So everything that's on this side can never be on this side, and everything's on this side can never be on this side. But if you take it together, you sublate the one into the other, creating the synthesis comes back around and gives meaning to these two abstract points. That creates your identity. Your identity is everything that can be and everything that can't be taken together to create a whole picture. And what Heidegger is saying is that, tisk, what a shame, because that's not the picture. That's not even the whole picture. The whole picture requires that you understand that the originary moment is this attunement thing that's going on, this relation between, let's say, hearing and speaking, which Heidegger is not claiming is his version of he's just saying that's Parmenides' move, which gets caught up into the problem of metaphysics that he's trying to criticize, and therefore the problem of a certain kind of theology. Does that make sense? No. Okay, so continue. Oh, did you want to say
And I was
something?
going to try to link it to Leibniz.
No, not yet, not yet. We're almost there. We got 2 more sentences, and we're at Leibniz.
In the history of Western philosophy, identity was at first thought as unity,
Okay,
as
that's
the
that.
unity of a thing with itself.
Right, so thesis, antithesis, taken together, Okay, go on.
The two thinkers who were most explicitly concerned with unity or identity as a central problem were perhaps Plotinus and Leibniz. Plotinus begins his 6th Ennead, 9, with the statement, "It is in virtue of unity that beings are beings." Plotinus' ultimate reality, the one, is beyond even being, a statement that puts Plotinus on the border line of Western thought.
Okay, now, while this is very interesting about Plotinus, do not worry about it at the moment. But if it helps you, go to think about that movie with, they're always searching for the one. What was that called? The Matrix. So don't think of the one as God. Think of the one as Nemo, or whatever his name was, something. Neil.
Nemo was a fish.
Oh, Nemo was the fish. That's right. Don't think
Also
about
the one.
don't think about either of those two. Let's go to Leibniz. Yeah. What does Leibniz have to say? So what does Leibniz think about unity now?
Leibniz develops the concept of unity in his Monadology as simplicity, individuality, and above all, uniqueness, which he establishes with the help of the principle of the identity of indiscernibles. If two things have absolutely nothing which distinguishes them from each other, they are identical. They are the same thing.
What were we going to say?
Resting on this, that we read of Heidegger now, and what we were discussing 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Right, the moment. I believe that last 2 weeks ago, I was sort of confused because I fell for somehow the sound of the name monad.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept identifying it visually with something like a marble, no matter how small it would.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And
It's all right.
and then if I went back and I really tried to find in Leibniz what he meant by that, and then that's precisely the point he's making.
Mhm.
That it is not a point, it's not a one thing, it's not a concluded thing, but is the difference between the totality of open possibilities versus the reality of some determinations.
Okay.
So the monad can be any form of dimensions, or better, the monad is dimensionality versus the totality of possibilities that is abstract, only for non-existent. Thinkable is God, the way he puts it, but it's metaphysical. Somehow, by doing that, he opens the field, conceptually, he opens the field for science, living outside metaphysics already. That's the way I started understanding it. Therefore, then it made sense. You were mentioning the monad as a physical law.
Mhm.
The other time, I could not get how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
And now it makes perfect
Okay.
sense because it's a pattern.
One person has come over to the field. Anybody else want to try it?
But which is the difference in this case among what you said and just a perspective?
It's not a perspective. Well, it is and it isn't a perspective. Perspective in Leibniz, in this case, is a very delicate term because each monad has a perspective on the whole universe and mirrors it. But if you leaving that aside and using perspective in the lay sense, it is not a perspective. It is a form of actualization of something that is a possibility. So the whole game that happens, that to me happens in Leibniz, is in between. It's the Aristotelic heritage that he gets and he reinterprets possibility or something that has the power of becoming. Power is not like what the potence of becoming, and is later on is being called virtual, which got sounds as an easier term to understand. And instead, what becomes actual. In my understanding, the link between the two, there is an incommensurable gap, it's infinitesimal, the link between possibility and actuality.
Okay.
So what one has in the present is always a configuration of possibilities, never all of them. There's not a point of view, there's not, but it is a situation as in a distribution, if you like, or a way of repeating a pattern or a rhythm.
So a different way of putting this, which is probably going to be a terrible example, so I'm already apologizing before I put it out there, which is that some people think of identity as something that happens to them. So it's from sort of like the outside in. And that is not untrue. You can be walking down the street and you will be, quote, interpolated, caught, cold as male, female, black, white, whatever the thing is. So you're made. At the same time, or maybe at totally different times, particularly as children, one doesn't take on the notion of interpolation the same way, because one sees their identity from the inside out, which is why it's always so shocking when one grows up and realizes there's racism, you know, misogyny, homophobia, whatever the thing is, because as from the inside out, everything's looking very different than from the outside in. So this is probably not making any sense at all. So from the point of view of a monad, which is what he's talking about, the identity of a monad is that which goes this way as opposed to this way. Now this becomes foundational for Freud, who also believes in the questions of projection. But in fact, one is not actually, in this very limited sense, projecting. One is just looking. One is just seeing. And one goes through the world totally shocked when someone takes them up as being, I don't know, falling in some category of female or black or whatever the thing is. At some point, one is taught that they're being looked at from the outside in. But until that happens, which can happen very early, but until that happens, it's the inside out. And this is the first simple notion of perspective that Leibniz is putting forward, this inside out thing. So it doesn't matter where you're looking as, I mean, he's not talking about a human, but we're going to humanize it just to give you a sense of it. Wherever this simple structure is, it's seeing out there, it's not seeing itself. There used to be a joke that was something like, it doesn't matter how ugly I am because I don't see me. You know, you see me or whatever, some sort of stupid thing like that. Is that kind of thing, like, do you actually know what you look like, really look like?
Is it a bit like, I had this thing with my son the other night where he does dance.
Is this the same one with the football probably?
Yeah. And he dances, and his dad was trying to dance for him, and he got really cross with his dad because he said, "Dad, you look like an idiot," which means I look like an idiot. Is it that sort of...
And did Dad go, uh-huh?
Yeah.
That's right, great.
That's what we're meant to
Child
do.
ruined for like
But it's
7
almost
years
that
of therapy.
sort of thing where he's suddenly seeing how other people might see him through something else.
Yeah, so in that case, what he's done is he's projected himself as Dad, and Dad now is doing this thing and he doesn't accept it.
Yeah.
Or he, you know, but literally, especially when you hear your own voice or see yourself, often you just don't look like that, or you don't think you look like that, or it's just weird. And so you either have to learn your angles, you know, how you can look the best, or you learn what you look like. But what the rest of the world sees can be very different than what you think you're seeing of yourself. So there's a different play going on here. Where does that perspective sit? In, you know, sort of classical art theory, perspective is out there, and you learn how to make it look have depth, no depth. But from what monads are happening, from what Leibniz is trying to put forward around the monad, is that the perspective takes on a direction. It takes on a duration. It takes on a temporality. It takes on these things that are fuzzy-ish, because they're not even fuzzy. Temporality has modalities to it. So it's not quite as fuzzy as all that. It's not just, that's why I was saying it's not just something that is up in the air, or, you know, it could be anything at all times. Let's go to Leibniz now.
Sorry, and is a monad,
So, sorry, say that again?
is that a filter then?
No. So that's a good question. And I can see why you would think that, because perception gives that sense of constructed reality of some kind, and you're passing something through.
I was just also thinking about what he said. He said that a monad is a set of possibilities and not
Yes.
the whole of it.
Yes.
And I thought then you kind of get the whole and you filter it, and you get a
Then
set
you get
that
metaphysics.
is the monad.
Yeah, you get metaphysics there. And it's very easy, or it's not so much as easy, but it's very classical to move into metaphysics that way, because that is the kind of norm of how one is thinking in a modern or a postmodern, or even not postmodern, either not modern sense, where you're thinking in this way in which divisions create boundaries. Whereas here, the boundary is created because of a relation. And that relation is it's a relation between, in this case, speaking and attunement.
Oh, I was just going to say, he talks about living mirror, and when I was reading Foucault's writing on Las Meninas, and he was talking about Velasquez and how perspective then was seen very much bleakly. You know, you sort of view the painting, you see you only see what he's drawing through the mirror.
Yeah.
And I think that
at that time.
And why do you only see, why would the viewer only be able to understand Velasquez through the mirror? What's being said there?
It's a question of, like you're saying, it's a question of perspective, I think. It's a question of looking obliquely, like not looking
Directly?
Yeah.
Yeah, sideways.
Yeah.
It's a kind of sideways question, yeah.
Going
Okay.
at an angle, or a curve actually. He talks about the curve and the way that your eyes take and
Okay,
through
so
the painting.
just hold on to that for a moment, because this way of looking is also gonna come into this. So, you know, I just was talking about kind of like, I don't know, a little robot, yourself as a robot going, what do you see as you go off into your, you know, day. But there's something else about the looking, and how the looking manifests an
And
identity.
it's looking back at you, and it's looking but being looked at as well.
Well, there's a
So-
very famous passage in Foucault's, it's a famous passage now, where is it? I think it's in his Sexuality, Uses of Pleasure, but I'm not 100% certain, volume 4, where he says that identity is not just in the eye of the beholder, which is Plato, but in the eye of the beholder's eye, throwing it back to you, and you catching it.
Yeah.
So it's that movement. But again, this thing of the way the identity gets established, it's not that you sort of have to run around having friends going, who am I? Say back to me who I am, although that's always a good sign of a friend. It's basically that this notion of reflection, which is not that he's not self-reflexive, it's not in the Kantian sense, it's this way in which something can create a chasm that is itself not a void. So this is what's going to be key here. This notion of difference, unlike in a metaphysics move, the notion of difference has a substance to it. It has some kind of an energy, let's say. It's got some, even black matter has something to it. And so in the end of the day, as we're going to see as we get past this, the monad is the forerunner for singularities. But it's going to bring in this very different ways of talking about this obliqueness, this curve, you know, and so on. If we go to the monadology, I just want to go to the very first section of it. Everybody has access to Dropbox, right?
Oh, you have two.
Quite sad, you know.
Two different translations.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. That's
In fact, 3 if we have this
nice. Thank you very much.
one. Okay.
Oh, the notes. Look, books with notes.
Ah!
I learned so much more from it than
That's so
with
funny.
the books from notes. Like without notes.
When
All
you say
the
notes, you mean people writing it? Or do
Yeah,
you
when
mean-
people write in the book,
Yeah.
I much would prefer it because then suddenly you read something ridiculous on the side and you're like, oh, okay. So you have that fair with my
That's
mother.
right, that's right. I mean, someone writes something ridiculous, that someone who will not be named. Okay, once again, we turn to number 1. Jakob, since you're totally into this, would you read number 1 out, even though we'll probably have 17 different ways that number 1 is going to sound?
The
Okay.
monad, of which we shall here speak, is merely a simple substance, which enters into composites, simple, that is to say, without parts.
Okay, now I'm going to read you what my translation says. 1. My topic here will be the monad, which is just a simple substance. By calling it simple, I mean that it has no parts. Has is emphasized, as opposed to no. It contains nothing. So catch the subtlety there, delicacy of how he's talking about, huh? Oh, sorry. My topic here will be the monad, which is just a simple bumpkin from the north. When I was in Amsterdam, or sorry, in the Netherlands, there was an expression saying, I'm just a stupid guy from the north. That basically meant you were very smart, and that that person should be avoided at all costs if they mention that as a way of explaining themselves. So this is, every time I see this, I always think of that expression. I'm just a simple monad from the north. By calling it simple, I mean it has it contains no parts. What is the intransitive word or the infinitive word for has? What's the to have? And so what does have mean? What does to have mean? Contain, yes. What else does it mean?
Possess.
To possess.
Consists
Very
of.
important. It's the possession. It possesses. It's very important. It possesses qualities. The quality that it possesses is no parts. Though it can be, emphasize, a part of something composite. So another way of thinking about that is the be, the to be. What are you thinking?
It's pure. It's just on its own. It just is.
Yes.
So-
That famous "it just is."
Yeah.
Now we start making me weep because we finally get to the substance here. Because one of the things that the to be is doing in Leibniz that it is not doing in previous scholars that we've looked at is that this is can be inhabited. This is a funny, weird is. You know, in Hegel and others, not to keep blaming this poor Hegel, but in Zizek, let's go after him. He's my favorite hated topic. Okay, in Zizek, you're always going after the object, but you can never grasp it. And his view is that if you get to the object of your desire, then you don't want it. That's typical Zizek, you know, and he develops it pretty much from the Hegelian mood that if you grab for the present, it's already future or past. Something like that, you know, that this move. And so the only way to articulate the present is to understand how it unfolds and has a relationship that creates its ground. So you can actually talk about the present. Otherwise, it's got to be mediated, it's got to have the whole relationship between time and so on. But here, the monad names the is. Now let's go back thinking about it. Let's go back to the question of how this is gets established in Heidegger. What is this famous, irritating equation that he comes up with?
A equals A.
A equals A. You just want to like knife in the head, you know, it's just like, oh God. And it's said with such, you know, glowing eyes and epiphany moment, you know, A equals A. What does that mean? I mean, other than obviously this thing called A is equal to this thing called A. What is it? What's that equal sign doing?
The belonging together.
They belong. So the equal sign for Heidegger is that it means link together. It means pull together, like it means belonging. So that A is A. The is like two hands grabbing the endpoints. A on the one hand and God, that's sad, and A on the other hand. I didn't do that on purpose, but I liked it, so now we'll keep it. So this is A equals A, grabbing the A's. This is the equal sign. This is the is. Now the is has the A's. Gotcha. Why you're short and curly. I've got the A's. You belong to me. Who's the me that the A's belong to? They belong to the is. So the is alive. The is can be a part of something. In fact, if you really want to get picky about it, the is always a part of something because it sounds absolutely ridiculous to just talk to B. Yeah, so it's connected to something. My topic here will be the monad, which is just a simple guy from the north. By calling it simple, I mean that it owns no parts, though it can be a part of something. So this is the first articulation of a very complex notion of difference that he's going to develop and that people are going to run with, particularly in complexity theory and later on in, well, not later on, but prior to that in different forms of quanta, where you begin to understand that in allowing that in being a part of something, it doesn't mean that you're taking on its image. It's more like this. A is A. I'm a part of those two A's, or I, the is a part of these two A's. And that's a very different notion of being a part. Notice I'm a part of them, and I'm also apart from them. So it's not that this A is distance from this A, it's that this is simultaneously belonging to these two things and also apart from them.
This is also why Leibniz describes the moments as without bodies,
Yes,
but then describes matter as emerging from the configuration of moments.
yes. And in fact, you could read the word soul as a monad. Well, of course it is a monad. Or I meant as difference, as a living difference. Let's try it again. We got A is A. A is apart from A. Do you remember as the young MA students that you were only very recently? In fact, some of you are still the young MA students very recently. Anyway, moment of silence. That when we talked about A is A, it was, I want to belong, I want to be alone, the Greta moment. And the way it was explained at the MA level was that these two A's were by themselves. But actually now we can think about it very differently. It's not about the A, it's about the is. And that, actually, for Jakob, for your work, that's precisely where this palimpsest layering business is coming in, or could be coming in, let's say. Okay. My topic here will be the monad, which is just a simple substance. The key here is also the word substance, because he's not saying it's not a thought, it's not an abstraction, it's something, it's a matter. It's got matter to it. It's a materiality of some kind. By calling it simple, I mean that it has no parts, though it can be a part of something composite. 2, there must be simple substances because there are composites. Now, what's the difference between 1 and 2 here? Does everybody have this version, or do you also have this version?
No, mine's a bit different.
That's
Can you share that version, if you have that version? Do you have that version?
That one's on Dropbox.
Yeah, that's the one that's on Dropbox. Does the chair over here have ways to see? Okay, okay. All right. Stay with us, Lauren. Don't read this. Mattia, you want to read that aloud, number 2?
And there must be simple substances, since there are composites or compounds. For a composite is nothing but a collection or aggregation of simple things.
Okay. Do you want to read the Dropbox version?
I don't have this one.
Not mine is not the
There must be simple substances.
Okay, stop. There must be simple substances. There is always the is. You go up in space, you're in the is. The is what exists. Of all the things that one has to understand in any of this, and the true casualty with metaphysics that Heidegger wants to get out of is the view that the is doesn't exist. Not only does the is exist, it is really the only thing that exists until it becomes a composite. What's happening over there with you?
Okay, so it's that thing, it's like, how do you know you're alive? And I just know I'm alive.
So you're looking out.
Yeah, but also there's in some ways there's the coming back that makes you know you're alive, but there's that faith, whatever, that you have to say that there is some reality to what I'm experiencing.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there, because while that is true, what you're saying, it's not clarifying this famous thing called the is.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think through it as
Okay.
but ultimately as no matter how I package the experience of being alive, the fact is I am alive. And there's stuff that goes on all the time, all over the place that I can't explain.
The fact is, you is.
And it is, yeah, and
You
it
are.
just is. So yeah, so it's so that there. I think it's that thing. There's something, and everything else happens because of that something. So
Okay, we're getting warmer. We're getting warmer.
So there's the without the something, the everything else can't happen.
Okay, so there has to be something rather than nothing
Yeah.
that starts things off.
Yeah.
It's a big contradiction because there's, you know, as you know, there's a whole other theory that says the world starts from nothing and goes to something.
But that nothing is the something.
But that nothing
yeah.
is the something because the nothing really isn't the nothing.
Yeah.
The nothing really is a something. The something that it is a singularity. The singularity is basically a black hole, but we're not going to go there right now, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to stick here with this is and the little monad.
And without the is, the bits can't join together. So there
Right.
can't be there can't be the interaction, the identity construction, the
Okay, so if there is a composite,
experience.
that implies that there must be a simple substance.
Yeah.
So why is that not a tautology?
Because that will
Kind of explains how
Oh,
nothing
shit.
becomes something.
Okay, so, well, let's say the is something. It's not nothing, okay? So the next step of the argument is that if the is a simple substance that doesn't have any divisions, just sort of sits there hovering, but is able to, like Play-Doh, stick things together, and now becomes something, becomes a composite,
yeah.
right? Something like that. Then that there are composites mean ipso facto, IPSO, great Latin expression, ipso facto, in reverse, take it as a given. That if you follow this logic, ipso facto, it means that there must be simple substances. Got a problem with that, our logician here?
No, it's what is getting out here.
You should have a problem with this.
But there is a problem.
You
because
rephrase it. There's a problem. Gosh, there's not.
This second paragraph
Yes. It's like I'm wounded. Sorry, go on.
is the most difficult because here and then later on when he describes the principle of identity, he takes it from the consequence
Right.
to prove
The ground.
The ground.
The a
Yes.
priori, yes. Yes, and that's always irritating.
And in some other texts it makes more sense, but the fact that there are
So what's the difference between number one, which says, by calling it simple, oops, by calling it simple, I mean that it has no parts, comma, though it can be a part of something, not it is a part of something, but it can be. And then the second one says, there must be simple substances because there are composites. A composite thing is just a collection of simple ones that happen to have come together.
well,
We have one person in the room who's going, yes, yes, okay. Everyone else is like,
there must be simple because there are composites now. There are is that now here at present this afternoon
okay,
we are constantly confronted by composites.
okay,
Endless forms of multiplicity of composites. So this is where we're starting from. Our now is the composites. And the problem that he has is that how are we justifying and explaining these composites in the simplest possible way?
okay, so let's put number two on hold, because,
I have a comment.
Yes.
Just a quick one. If it's in the first one, it says has no parts, though it can be a part of something composite, and then it's kind of it's denying itself a little bit, doesn't it? In a
Okay.
way that if it has no parts, and for existence of monad, it's required for it to have no parts. Otherwise, it's not a monad, isn't it?
right,
And yet, if it belongs to something that's composite, it means it takes part in existence of the composite.
yes, just like I
Which
had those two things. That's-
Means that those two pens, part of those two pens create a part of.
Not part of the pens,
Oh,
all of the pen.
All of the pens are part of monad, isn't it? Well, not monad, but
and monad.
Is.
No, they're not part of, well, they're not in the monad. They're with the monad.
Yeah, with
So
the
it's a with, not a, yes.
So can the monad exist without the composite, but the composite can't exist without the monad?
Right.
Mhm.
So in that sense, the monad is first, logically, but maybe not reality-wise,
Yeah, yeah.
because there's no first. But if there were a first, it would be the monad, but then there doesn't, you need, but let's just wait. Go to number 3, try number 3, Jakob, read number 3.
Something has no.
No, slow, let people hold.
Something that has no parts can't be extended.
Something that has no parts
Can't be extended.
can't be extended,
Can't have a shape.
can't have a shape.
And
I'm gonna
can't
just your
be
echo here.
Split up.
And can't be split up.
So monads are the true atoms of nature.
Okay, so let's say it again, let's try it again, I'm gonna be your double act here.
Something
Something
that has no parts
that has no parts,
can't be extended.
cannot be extended in any way,
Cannot have a shape.
cannot have any shape,
And can't be split up. Sorry, I feel like in the church with the echo. There's always a little echo when you listen to Chris talking. And he loves you.
and can't,
And
Can't-
can't be split up.
and can't be split up.
So monads, oh God. Oh God.
That's
So
right,
oh God
yes.
are the true atoms of nature.
So monads are the true atoms of nature. So let's try it now with the word is.
Something that has no parts can't be extended, can't have a shape.
No,
can't be
let's
split up.
let's do this. Anytime you see a something or a monad, use the word is.
Is
Or the is even, because we can be very.
the is has no parts,
Right.
can't be extended,
Right,
cannot have a shape,
right,
and cannot be split up.
correct.
So the is
Yes,
is
yes,
the true atom of nature,
yes.
the element, because you see there's simply the singularity and multiplicity here.
Yes. It took you to figure that one out, that's true, yes, this is what,
The element, the is the element of which everything is made.
but
But
now
at
it
the
gets
same
even
time, it's
worse,
made
it gets
of
even
itself,
worse. It get-
Because if everything is made, then it's made,
So the
from
is
it.
is present,
yeah, but is made from is as well, isn't it?
yeah,
For it to exist and be part of existence, it will need to be made from with itself. So is made from is.
so is itself.
So there is there a lower is then? Is there like a lower is that
Is
is
there-
made of?
Is there a lower is?
The smaller
Yes.
is?
This-
There's always a smaller is, isn't there?
So which
A
would be
smaller
the
is.
difference now with Plotinus?
Yes,
I
so say again what he
like,
says.
If we get what he said by
No,
changing-
Plotinus, what does Plotinus say that you're thinking about?
Yeah, because Plotinus talking about the one
Mm-hmm.
said that everything is like let's say that the one is everything and
Right.
everything is the one
Yes,
in a way that is transcendental.
it's not transcendental by which one would mean transcendent, but it's,
Yeah,
but it's transcendental, yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, good,
So is that the same thing
yes,
now?
yes, that's what he's stealing, that's what Heidegger then is stealing from these two. That's exactly right, yeah.
But there is also, I think, for Leibniz, the fact that he tries to find a solution for keeping together the continuity of a oneness, of a unity, and the fact that there are parts.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the jump from the first to the second paragraph is very interesting, because in the first he lays out something that is entirely abstract, and then he jumps to the present. There are composite substances. Therefore, we now have to fill up all the space back to this first abstract statement of the monads and their description.
But why is number 1 any less or more abstract than number 2? Because
Well,
even
no,
though number
there's
2
not-
is sounding
the-
like it's a practical
No, it's
thing.
not practical in this sense, but the second paragraph refers to the present.
Mhm.
It refers to a moment and a place in history as well, the composites.
Mhm.
And
The now.
The now. And the first paragraph instead is, no, it just says my topic will be the monad, which is the simplest substance.
So could another way of putting this be that the monad names duration and at the same time names a moment, like a singular moment, like an instant?
It names.
Like how long is an is?
Well, if it's like Plotinus, that will be the definition. Like that anything that happens is part of something that you can't perceive, but
Right.
that is the totality. Like it's the hidden root, the hidden reason of everything that appears.
Okay.
Like a fountain,
Yes.
the source of the fountain is that one, and you see the spills. You perceive all the accidental spills, but the source is behind the perception, but is the ground of everything.
Okay, so that's not quite the same then. No, I can see what you're saying now. No, then in that sense, if you're going to use the notion of the fountain, which expresses something, this thing called fountain, at the same time is a composite of the nows of the fountain, of all the nows of the fountain, making the fountain be a fountain, as it were, then what I'm hearing you say is that those are the same thing, this notion of the several bits of monads that make up this thing called the fountain, and the one monad that is this thing called the fountain.
No,
No.
I said so because
Okay,
I tried
maybe
to
just
because I tried to use a metaphor. Because
Right,
of course
okay.
you can't put an image on something that is the
Without an
definition
image.
of what can have an image.
Right, exactly right, so that's why that's not quite working.
Yeah, because I just tried to make
Right,
a
right,
metaphor,
okay,
but
no,
you can't
no,
because
that's
you're
right.
talking about the mystic.
That's, well, yes, but the mystic has materiality to it. This is what's creepy about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a mysticism about imminency. I don't know how to say that.
But I don't know if you need to call it mystical. I think what I don't know if I would call an is mystical. I don't know if that would help or not help it, but if we could figure out what it means to talk about duration and the point within a duration, then
Well,
we're getting closer
I
to.
just said mystical because by definition, I think this will work for either Leibniz and Plotinus. You can't have the perception of the everything. Of course, you will stick on the monad.
My worry about using the word mystical is that it immediately brings the argument back over to a God position. And while they are talking about God in one level, they're also talking about this materiality of something.
Yeah,
what-
let's say transcendental then.
What?
Let's say transcendental.
Yeah, transcendental.
Yeah,
yes.
I was just using the two things in the as synonyms because
Just be careful with that, because one can lead back, because you can lead back to a Heideggerian move, which Heidegger couldn't get out of, which was the ontotheologic. Because in the end, with identity difference, he can't get past this. Whereas Leibniz and then people jumping over Heidegger, like Deleuze and so on, they do get past that by using this monad. And in fact, I think that the ectoplasm might have some sort of odd comment. If the ectoplasm names the embodiment of the spirit, it seems to me that they're trying to, I mean, crassly, but they're trying to name this thing that's not nameable, not physical, not something, but in fact they just present it as though it is. But maybe that's pushing it again. What are you going to say?
I was going to answer to Alberto and to what you asked before about the duration and,
Yeah.
and the instant. To me, this problem of the monad that Leibniz poses can be seen as the difference between completeness, the unity, and incompleteness.
Yes.
In terms that completeness is seen as the one or the unity, but precisely because it has all the options, it is everything laid out at the same time in a sort of an eternity, can also be considered as zero.
Yes.
There is no difference in completeness.
Right.
It's solid flat.
Right.
While incompleteness, one configuration or out of a plurality of configuration possible, has dimensionality,
Mm-hmm.
precisely because it is not complete.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it has one of the possible configuration of the distribution between unit of time, not moment, instant, and duration.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In that sense, I see Leibniz developing these distance because
Yes,
it's
yes,
very
absolutely.
easy to fall to see a mystical element in his work, but actually he works it out mathematically rather clearly or logically. Like, I cannot follow his mathematics, but
Can you explain it again? Because I think that what Alberto's trying to get at is a way of sort of saying it either allegorically or metaphorically, but what you're presenting is a kind of the analytic position of Leibniz. Can you just repeat that bit again?
my understanding of the unit. Let's start from another point. Leibniz, to my understanding, is concerned with the relation between infinity or a completeness of continuity and its parts, and how to understand them and hold them together without falling in the paradoxes that came out of Parmenides and Zeno, so either being is or not being known is, or if you've got becoming, you've got to keep separating these, and the famous paradoxes of Achilles and the tortoise that will never be overtaken. And then he tries to respond to what just was said before him by Descartes, that instead understands both logic and nature as having atoms, real physical, possible smallest steps of both thought and material, matter and bodies, beyond which there is nothing. And Descartes rejects that. Descartes, sorry,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you mean
Leibniz rejects that, and he introduces the idea of an infinite divisibility of things. Because there would be no other way to keep together the parts and the thought whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are various folds to this argument, but what becomes very important is that the unity, the wholeness, where one can have a totality, a universe, and have all of it and describe it, is unattainable because there is an infinite divisibility in between now and that. So that, but that
Right.
would plunge us back into the original paradox
Yes.
of Zeno.
So how does he?
So what
not
he
fall back in it?
uses
Yeah.
is that it turns somehow the existing logic and theology inside out. So God, instead of being an external creator, first of all is an engine inside the becoming of the world that includes or excludes possibilities logically. But even more so is that what we have, the present, the paragraph 2, there are composites. So that how are we working back from that, the logic of the present? There are continuous exclusions of what cannot coexist with what already is. Therefore, there are continuous exclusions from the solidity of a totality that would be the one, which would have no definition because everything is possible at the same time. All colors on at the same time, all shapes on at the same time makes for a complete lack of differentiation. While the present is precisely differentiation, one of the infinite and infinitesimal.
Okay, so then I have a question to ask you, or not just you,
Mm.
you in the wide sense. If that's true, why, which I think one sort of layer of what you're saying is definitely true, why does the monad speak to the word difference?
Precisely because the monad is one possible articulation.
It's numbers. It's
Yeah,
equal
because
to zero.
another thing is it's here. Another word
The monad's not the number.
But in the becoming, how do you say that?
Yeah.
They are numbers.
But the monad's not a number. I mean, the monad's not a segment. It's not, it doesn't take on the property of a number.
No, it's not a segment or a number, or not only a segment of a
Is it
number.
the relation between the numbers and the zero?
Well, there's something about the relationship that
It's
you guys are
between the
missing here.
0 and the 1.
Yeah.
And I was looking, because Leibniz also comes up with the binary digitalization of numbers. Here it is, where it describes that 0 can be described by 0, 1 by 1, 10, 2 is 1, 0, 3 is 1, 1, 4 is 1, 0, 0, and so forth.
Yeah.
And through this, through the introduction of differential calculus, it says I can describe everything through this. So what one has, if you go a bit beyond number 8, where it's just 1, 0, 0, 0, you imagine having a string of these, and you just have 1 and 0, precisely like a computer, or basic models for computers, where you just have a rhythm or a pattern,
Right.
and or a string or a way of moving. Could be adjusted to the performance, can be anything.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there because I'm looking at people and they look like they're not really hearing this. Are you hearing this? Okay, Sophie, are you hearing?
Yeah. So, but that's how I read it very much as kind of like points and relationship of the monad to another point,
Okay.
and how that it's the relationship between each point and their reflection back onto each other as well.
Would it be fair to say the relationship of each is onto each other?
But is there more
Yeah.
than one?
Well,
No,
Is it?
and yes.
I'm not getting this today.
It is right.
And I will
That's
come
right. Grace throws herself out.
there
Yeah.
is also, you have to think that he was working in parallel, and he was hoping to work in dialogue, but ended up working in opposition with Newton. So he looked a lot at
In a position, you were like,
opposition.
yeah, well, opposition, I was going to say. They had issues.
And he was studying a lot the law of motions and how to understand space and time. And for the law of motions, he says that one should, instead of thinking there is motion and then there isn't motion, should think rest as an infinitesimal reduction of motion. Because what he's trying to do is to think not endpoints, not boundaries, but limits in very, very different ways, limits as dimensions. So in this book, which is in the Dropbox actually, as well, Leibniz shorter texts, on page 39, this is an excerpt from a letter to Sir André Morel, written in 1698. He writes, well, I started from the beginning. As all minds are unities, it can be said that God is the primitive unity, expressed by all the others according to their capacity. Now, capacity here is important, I'll go back to it. His goodness moved him to act, and there are in him three primacies: power, knowledge, and will. The result of these is the operation or creature, which is varied according to the different combination of unity and zero, or rather, the positive with the privative. For the privative is nothing other than limits, and there are limits everywhere in the creature, just as there are points everywhere in the line. However, and this is what I was getting at, a creature is something more than limits, because it has received some perfection or power from God. So, and then it continues, for the ultimate point is nothing more than the negation of the progress beyond which it ends. The ultimate point is nothing more than the negation of the progress beyond which it ends. So it is not finding a point or a line that there isn't such a thing as a point at the end of the line, or a line that surrounds or therefore defines something else, bounding it. It's simply no longer continuing. This to me is it's fundamental change.
It's a fundamental change. Are people hearing this? Grace, like, ah, yes.
So there's just no limit, it just continues.
No,
The limit exists, sorry.
But it's not a limit, it's a fixed limit. So it just
no, it's not that the limit continues, that at a certain point things cease to exist, or cease to continue.
So there is no order, no.
There is no
stop
famous
point,
cut
it
or
just
third dimension we're discussing for
slowly
Christmas.
dies.
Yeah, it just doesn't go any further.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go any further, not because it's stopped, but because it can't. Or to put it slightly differently, a cloud can't go further than what it is, right? So you wouldn't want to say a cloud can't go further than its limit, because while that's true, it's not visually true. A cloud is only as far as its limit goes. So that's what's being said here. It can only go as far as its limit, and you might want to say, well, it's resting, but in fact, it's not really resting, it just can't go any further than what it is. So the is can never be more than what it is making up the is. And on the other hand, the making up of the is made up of lots of things that are all part of the way in which the present gets articulated in the now, in the is, in this bigger now. Yeah.
And there's also an end without negation, because beyond it, there is nothing else.
Beyond it, there's nothing else, and this gets into the whole question of the universe. Beyond the universe, there is nothing else. Of course, then they found a whole other set of universes beyond the universe, and then beyond those universes, they found universes, and beyond those, they found. But at some point, logically, there is nothing else beyond that, wherever else you can possibly go.
I think he seems to be sort of getting at the multiplicity.
You mean deriving from
Well, no, well, I was just thinking of like the distinction between the virtual and the actual. And it's like as if it's sort of sometimes he seems to be getting at the virtual, but really it's more like he's getting at the immanence of the actual. He's not. I don't think Leibniz is quite getting to the importance of the virtual that Deleuze brings.
No, I agree with that, yeah. But what is he getting at? Because you're right that Deleuze pushes it further, but what is it that is coming at here?
Well, the relation of the is that is the differentiation, the event the event that relates to the differentiation of matter.
Would you say then that the
as its
monad?
actualization.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you say that the monad is an event? Is the event?
Well, in a way, I suppose, like, I think I would say actually a more important notion of event that is still mostly missed is the event that relates to the virtual Deleuze's. So where I haven't quite got enough to see where he's probably pointing more, which he probably is pointing to the virtual as well, but it seems to me that he's more pointing towards the capacity sort of for immanence in the actualization of matters, the unfolding of time and matter, so the unfolding of spatial temporality, rather than the differentiation, which Deleuze would call differentiation with a C, I think it is, and it might be the T, which relates to the virtual, which is, it seems that relates to the hidden, and that relates to the is, which is this more like invisible is.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, because while you're correct, are people following this hidden virtual thing? We got a lot of wrinkled brows here. So I want to, let's just sort of back, we've only gotten to number, well, I guess you could say another whole page, another whole work, but if we have the monad as being a simple substance, but by simple it means that it's not divisible, but on the other hand it can be infinitely divisible, and by saying that it's both, how to say this without sounding ridiculous, but that it's both infinitely divisible and at the same time not at all divisible, what could that possibly mean?
Duration.
Say it again?
Duration.
Yes, and how did you get there? Because of the three words we've had on the table, well, we haven't talked before. Now, how did you get to duration? That's exactly right. How can you be both static and, how can you be both?
For a start, it's not something that we can pluck out of the air.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we can divide it.
Good.
By using,
Okay.
by introducing time.
So time becomes a
whatever-
marker.
Yeah.
Okay, could we introduce the smudge?
And I don't know why I wonder, does perdurance come into this somehow?
Yes.
But
Can
I
you
don't
explain?
quite know. I was rifling through it, trying to find.
Does anybody remember what perdurance is?
Because I was watching up on hiding. Well, probably I get it all wrong. That's a bad announcement to make. I thought it related to the between of the. So you've got the overwhelming and the arrival, and perdurance is the sort of between this like which is the how much of it is the event of appropriation.
So the overwhelming, what happens, what is a thing called the overwhelming?
being is the oh no.
What is this overwhelming? Are you walking along and suddenly a big hand comes, or the comic where the shit falls on your head, you know, like?
I think it is sort of that. Well, that's. I think that's where the being sort of. That's like the event of that. But then when it's the arrival, it gets grounded back into a kind of identity, and so that's why it doesn't get rid of identity.
Okay, so what is overwhelming?
So.
What does it
the
mean to be over?
difference is the durance is difference, and so the difference is overwhelming.
Okay, what does the word perdurance literally mean? What does anybody know the sort of neologism of this? Okay.
Last
I guess it's a compound of persistent, as in it stays, it sticks, and endurance.
Good. So the endurance is one aspect, and the fact that it sticks is another aspect. And these are not so much contradictory, but sort of, and what's that mathematical term when you're like it's skewed, like you're not parallel. What's that? Tangent. Yeah, they're tangential to each other. And that's why perdurance is so odd. It's capturing a tangent as opposed to a parallel or a intersection. It's capturing something that goes in a skew.
So is it, I'm sort of imagining the duration as an arc, a trajectory, and it's kind of pushing up, like if it's a piece of elastic that could curve around, but you're sort of creating a ripple in it that creates perhaps the event, is it, or creates the composite as well?
Good. Yes.
So,
Yes. Excellent.
and then you get to the fold maybe.
Oh, yes, right. God. Repeat that. And everybody try and hear what Stuart's saying here.
So it's imagining a curve, an arc of, so it's like on the
So the
graph
it
that
is
Mattia
what?
talked-
It is perdurance.
But yeah, and to try and sort of visualise it, it's a curve that would never meet. It would never. So it's not it's not from a.
It's like a spiral, but not a
Yeah,
even
it's
a-
always.
yeah,
it's
parabola.
always,
That's good.
yeah.
And why is it that? Why isn't it a straight line or an X or a squiggle?
Because it's neither going somewhere nor coming from somewhere. That,
Okay. And so that which is neither going anywhere nor coming anywhere
but it's constantly going. So it's constantly,
in some way.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
constantly active.
Right.
Yet it has these things happening to it that impact on it, will change change something for a moment, but won't affect the overall unfolding of it. So it would continue to.
Because it's not really unfolding.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons it's not going to affect the unfolding.
Right. But those flexions or creases or folds in it are the composites. So I guess it's several of these trajectories that collide.
Yes, and how is it that then perdurance forms composites and at the same time manifest the dwelling, the opening, how, yes, Jakob?
Just perdurance, yeah, and those. That thing. That's perdurance, yeah.
Okay,
Is that
yes,
right?
yes. Can you want to explain how that becomes perdurance other than looking very unusual in a class?
Chain explains. Okay. Okay, so those. How to explain? I don't know. I don't have language for it, but I will one day. When these two.
Can you hum it?
Sorry.
Can you hum it as opposed to say it?
Oh, okay. No, but I can do something else.
Okay.
That's disgusting.
You're going to try and blow a bubble.
not really. I wanted to stick those two, just agreeing with you.
Okay,
So you're like, oh, no,
okay.
well, not that way. That way. Yes, that's
Okay, now what is that?
and that's how Pedulus would fall, isn't it? No.
I don't know, because I'm not sure what you're doing.
I see.
What I'm trying to say is when.
Okay, forget about humming it or doing it,
Yeah.
let's say it.
Okay, let's go up because I'm not gonna explain it. My language is not
But
that.
I think that the rubber band is fantastic. Only it shouldn't be pulling, but should be the opposite, should be pushing something. Because in Pedulance, the overwhelming is the fact that the word is obviously here. It's overwhelming present, and but
Okay,
it's
so we finally got to what the overwhelming is.
but it's
Okay, it's
alive.
overwhelming not because it's attacking you, and you're like a marmite, and it's overwhelming. It's not like that, right?
But its arrival is never complete. So the word is, but what this is, once one clears it of all possible description, one remains with nothing. So Hegel would make one flow into the other. Heidegger keeps it continuously open, happening, but never reaching anywhere.
Okay,
So instead of being pulling apart, it should be something that prevents it from compressing it completely
and falling into itself and becoming a
So
black
like
hole.
a spring, really. I think they're like a spring.
yeah,
Yeah.
Tensor band.
Like a tensor band.
That would be
Yes.
right.
Yes, but we haven't gotten to tensor bound. Let's try it one last time, this time with gusto. We've got this thing called the monad. The monad names, I started out by saying the monad names difference. The monad names the is. But we're talking about an is that is no longer a place, but it's a spatiality. That is to say, it takes up space, but the space it takes up is moving. And so the space it takes up has to do with some kind of velocity, fast or slow or whatever. So those terms, velocity, have to do with duration. Those terms of fast, slow, something like that is a durational environment, a durational tempo, you can say. That's one aspect of this monad. It can't be divided, but we can talk about it in these different sort of elements. Duration, overwhelming, perdurance, because the is manages to shapeshift, depending on what the is brings together, and what at the same time is together in the is. So I guess what I think the takeaway from this, at least just for this moment in this seminar, at this section, so that you can kind of play with something, is that this particular takeaway is that the is fat. The is not a thin little, it's thick. It's got a viscosity to it. It's not nothing. So when you say something is not nothing, then what is it if it's not nothing? Then what's its positivity, as it were? The naming of monad allows one to think of a surface that actually something can happen on that surface, as the surface. That's odd, that a surface can actually have distinguishing features. A surface should be without distinguishing features. It's a surface. How can you be in a surface and not therefore be instead somewhere else? Because the surface can only be a top. So how could you be in it? You could be on the surface, that's probably more understandable, but in a surface? How could you be in the is? So the monad has odd qualities. The monad, again, think about the way in which the is. It's not that there's like 50 million ises, although if that helps you, go for it for the time being. The is able to mutate depending on what it is, depending on what it grasps. That's stage one, let's say, of the surface. Stage two of the surface is the surface actually has depth. That's the one great thing that one learned in working in media. That there's a depth of field in the 0 and 1 combos. It's a very odd form of depth. It's not perception in the sense that it's an illusion. There is actually depth. So the next problem is that if the is all that it is till you get to the end of it, of its little tentacles of isness, then what's beyond the is? And for Leibniz, nothing is beyond the is. If you want to make the big is, the universe is, the galaxy is, that version of the is, he calls that God. There's nothing beyond that. That's the is. So the is both belongs and separates. Because the is has these other features in it, dimension, velocity, a form of time that is always a moving form of time that is not necessarily a chronological time. These are all coming from Leibniz. And that, it's probably going to hurt your head for a little bit, where you try and think about how something on a surface can have depth. Just keep trying to think that way. How and why does that matter? Or how does it create matter? Because it creates matter somehow. Were you going to say something about that? What do you think? What's that? This is leaking. Next week, as you know, we have the famous lecture. This will be fun. Which is at 5:30. Can we attempt to meet here at 4 and have a 1-hour session, or shall we just, because it's driving me mad that we keep changing our seminar. I don't know what to do, because I'm not convinced we get this monad thing yet. The lovely little monad. The creepy little monad.
Is it easier to meet at Parkside?
Yes, that's a great idea.
I'm at Parkside all day.
Yes.
That would be very helpful.
Where do you recommend?
I don't know if you can book out a space.
Nah,
but
let's
you
not book
could,
out a space, let's just take a space.
There's breakout spaces.
There's breakout
Yeah.
spaces. Spaces.
Okay, you're
And
gonna
I
have to
don't think there'll be
tailgate.
any students there at 4 o'clock, so.
What, Wednesday? Yeah, no, it shouldn't be that busy, should it? Because it's an
Second
on
floor,
teaching,
there's a,
so...
Oh yeah, next to the coffee, there's the coffee.
Yeah, let's go to the coffee bar on the second floor.
Yeah.
Is it the
The
second
one.
floor? Or is it-
What time?
Is that the one on the balcony, kind of, next to the staircase?
Yeah.
Third floor, yeah, that is.
Where that
On the
lecture was.
staircase.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you just meet somewhere and then decide what to do.
And can you read the Dropbox version, okay, of the monad? And if we could just get to, well, you really need to get through the very first 10 little pieces here. Because what we meaning Leibniz and I, we're going to try and work in is this way in which something that has no volume, no mass, no whatever, still has a materiality. And I want to link that to how one understands the act of grasping, this techna. So might help to also read either Heidegger on the thing called On Thinking. That's in the Dropbox, right?
Sure.
Yeah. It's a long, involved thing, On Thinking. Take it into the bathtub with you. You know, flip through it. You know, drink some wine. Help yourself through it. Okay. Also, there's a number of you that I haven't seen yet for a while in terms of where you are in your work. I need to see you. We haven't seen each other, have we? Not for a while.
We've got one in a couple of.
Yeah, but I need to see people. To see you.
You're almost sounding a bit desperate.
That's right, I need to see people. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll meet at Parkside in the coffee shop.
Second
4
floor.
o'clock. Second floor.
Okay.
It's Yes, because I'm also trying to track down the new designer.
I was just hoping that your understanding was you were getting very excited there. It's quite